series. It is
yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, very good. It is a series of webinars that we have been arranging in cooperation with the Rondelli Foundation in Georgia. I mean, we, Estonian School of Diplomacy, and the Rondelli Foundation, also with the support of Swedish SIDA. And we've had very interesting discussions concentrating on, well, obviously things that are of interest to Georgia, but definitely also to Estonia and other EU countries. And today we thought of spending some time on discussing the future of Europe and NATO, and discussing it from the Baltic perspective. And quite often these organizations are discussed separately. Even here at our school also, we handle them, we tackle them separately. And just last week we had a good live seminar at last. Well, Estonia's opening up, right? So we had a good live seminar in cooperation with the Estonian Atlantic Treaty Association, and we exactly analyzed the cooperation between NATO and EU, and in a way we of course came to the obvious conclusion that these two organizations are the two sides of the same coin, and quite often actually, as we're doing it today, they should be discussed together. Well, we also briefly discussed what should be on the agenda today, and I'll make a couple of remarks or suggestions, but then on the other hand, of course, the distinguished panel that we have will put forward also other interesting prospects and ideas, and let's see where the discussion takes us. We have 1 hour and 15 minutes at our disposal. Well, we thought of discussing the latest developments in Belarus, how to deal with Lukashenko. We also thought that June is going to be a very busy international summits month. I mean, G7 leaders will meet in the UK. There will be the NATO Summit in Brussels, EU-US Summit with the US President Biden and 27 EU leaders meeting. And of course, in Geneva, we will have the Russia-US Summit. And let's see whether it will be a bit more successful than the previous one, at least successful from the Western point of view. And even though China is not in the North Atlantic, even the North Atlantic Treaty Association, and of course EU as a global economic power, has to also think about how will China influence the future of these two organizations. I will not speak further. We have agreed that Ambassador Alex Petriashvili will kindly introduce the three distinguished speakers today. I also noticed that of the 5 people here on the invitation for the webinar, I'm the only one without the title ambassador. So I will shut up for now and hand to Alex.
Thank you, Eke. Thank you. It's a great pleasure and honor to have this panel with very, very distinguished panelists, the great friends of Georgia from our friendly Baltic states. Estonia is represented by Ms. Marina Kaljurand, former foreign minister and the member of the European Parliament. I think more popular in Georgia than many Georgian politicians themselves. Georgian society closely follows your all statements, and we will discuss some of the latest ones. Ambassador Zygimantas Pavilionis is the chairman of the Lithuania's Parliament's Foreign Relations Committee, also devoted friend of Georgia with long political and diplomatic experience, and of course, Mr. Ambassador Ojar Skalniņš, the very, very experienced Latvian diplomat. I must say that all three of them, Mr. Kalniņš right now is the deputy chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee at the Latvian Parliament, and all three of them served as ambassadors to the United States, and I believe their experience will be very, very important and a great input to our today's discussion. So without further delay, I suggest that Ms. Kaljurand will start, open the panel, and then we will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for your very kind introduction. And Eka, that's not so bad. You're educating future ambassadors. So you're on your halfway to becoming ambassador. At least you know all Estonian ambassadors and many, 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 many more. Yes, I'm today participating in the capacity of the member of the European Parliament. I belong to the group of Social Democrats, but I think that even more important, I'm proud to be the chair of the South Caucasus delegation in the European Parliament. South Caucasus delegation, it means bilateral relations with Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. And trust me, guys, when I took the position, I was thinking about having nice time, enjoying food and wine. But these 2 years have been really, really difficult. There were many tensions. There was war in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I'm proud to represent European Parliament in relations with these countries. And I have to say that of course I'm worried. I'm worried about the present situation, and I'm worried seeing how quickly very positive changes can turn. How quickly a country, Georgia, who has been the best in the class for years, can fall into political crisis that might have an impact on the future integration with the EU, but also transatlantic ties. Eka wanted us to talk about more widely together EU and NATO, but I'll still start with EU, as that's something that I'm dealing on a daily basis. Eastern Partnership, for me, is a success story. Yes, there are problems at the moment with each and every Eastern Partnership partner. But the crucial thing is that it's the policy of open doors. It's the policy that allows countries decide about their future. It's not putting anything on any country, but it gives each and every country the possibility, the ability to develop their relations, transatlantic relations, European relations in the way they want to. And I can say that even sometimes we feel that we're tired of Eastern Partnership. There is a fatigue of Ukraine, Belarus, and Georgia. In Brussels, people want to discuss pandemic, vaccines, they want to discuss terrorism, they want to discuss economic recovery. So I can't say that Eastern Partnership is top priority in the European Parliament. But at the same time, as long as you have friends in the European Parliament, and you have them, we will keep putting it on the agenda in the European Parliament. And we will talk about the topics of Eastern Partnership, as well as each and every specific country. So we have had plenary discussions, we have had committee meetings, we have had very good meetings with experts and officials from all the countries. And as you know, we're preparing at the moment for the next Eastern Partnership Summit, which will happen in the autumn. So I think we have to have our hopes up. We have to be realistic. And I hope that we will come later also to the Georgia's EU membership application, where my message is, that's your decision, but manage expectations so that there will not be too many disappointments, like, for example, with visa freedom, when Georgia was ready for visa freedom, and you were promised visa freedom. But for political reasons, it was postponed until Ukraine also was ready to join the club. So happy to join this conversation, and I'll stop with my initial remarks here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaljurand. Thank you for
Please call me Marina.
Yes, Marina, yeah, with pleasure. for your very strong messages, very important messages. Now, I would like to ask Žygimantas to elaborate on the Lithuanian view on the European Union and NATO perspective. And what is the expectation from the NATO summit? And I know that you are dealing very closely with the Belarus issue, and I would be very happy to hear from you. How is it viewed from your side, please?
Thank you, Alex, and it's a pleasure to speak among friends, and especially with Marina, with whom we spent years in Washington together. But looking to Marina and thinking what she said, I will start with Estonia. I always do it when I meet Marina and other Estonian friends. You know, yeah, what I learned from our own accession process to EU and NATO, you cannot be average. You have to be the best to join the club. And for some time, Estonia, let's recognize, was the best. Estonia, you know, took a very open position towards free trade, 0 transitional period. I guess Latvia 4, we took the longest 6, and Estonia made very radical reforms. And Estonia was invited the first to accession negotiations in '97. So, well, later we catched up.
99.
99, yes, in Helsinki. So later we catched up, but this, you know, Estonian example, I always used in Lithuania saying, guys, you know, if you wanted to break the ice in the West, if you want them to believe us, you have to behave as being the champion. So I was very happy to see 3 associated foreign ministers finally to meet, you know, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, trying to say that we are the best. But even among those the best, if we speak Georgia, you know, you have to fight to be the best. And I agree with Marina, what happened with this internal crisis, it saddened us so much. And but now you have this deal negotiated by President Michel, by American diplomats, by all of us. Be very, you know, not to say careful, be really implement every word of it. Show your leadership from both sides, from government, from current opposition parties. You know, sign it, show to the West that you can do it. And in some cases, I'm disappointed. Not now speaking about this deal, because we will still have some time to speak about the deal and see the results. But speaking about Belarus, you know, Georgia for some reasons didn't join the sanctions. And I can understand diplomatically some reasons, but honestly, like freedom fighter, like person who really fight for your freedom, when seeing Ukraine joining the sanctions, and that, you know, that is a painful thing for Ukrainians to do it. I'm just, you know, making a rhetorical questions to Georgians. If we stand for democracy and you have this terrorist regime in Belarus who is killing people, hijacking planes, imprisoning thousands, torturing them, and this is very much supported by another terrorist regime in Russia who occupied your own territories. So guys, show some solidarity, because, you know, yesterday it was Ukraine, today is Belarus, maybe tomorrow it will be something again in Caucasus, and you will all, you know, shout for the solidarity. You have Biden administration, you know, Vice President Biden, we remember it well with Marina. He was one of those after you know, Russian invasion into Georgia, he was visiting you in the middle of reset. That was a brave thing for Biden to do. So Biden is a committed Democrat. He will fight for it, and we will fight for your NATO membership, for membership action plan that was delayed in Bucharest. We did it in the plenary, in Lithuanian plenary. with no abstentions. We will fight for your map, but fight for freedom yourself. Show that solidarity. Be Estonia in reforms. Be champion, because this is the only way to catch up. And I know that maybe Armenian Azeris audiences are also listening. I hope that Armenia, after elections, they might, you know, maybe not join the club. I think it was a mistake for Azerbaijan and Armenia not to sign association treaties in 2013 in Vilnius. But maybe, you know, Armenia can follow the path of free plus. Maybe they can upgrade relations, knowing great relations with incoming EU presidency, I mean French presidency, knowing our sympathies to them. I think they learned the mistake. What does that mean? To be left with some autocratic regimes who are playing with your fate. So stay with Europe, and maybe that will guarantee the way of your own future, your own sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Zigis, for your remarks. And now I'm having in mind that Mr. Kalnic still has the plenary session going on. Please, without delay, we're happy to hear your remarks as well.
Well, thank you very much. And our speeches are going on, so I should be able to speak uninterruptedly. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be with colleagues and friends. I just returned from a trip to Kiev and Donetsk, Ukraine last week. It was the first trip that I've been on in a year and a half since COVID. The first political trip, the first visit to a country. And to me, that visit capsulized all the issues that we are dealing with, whether it's EU, whether it's NATO. In fact, I was with our speaker and another member of parliament. And last Thursday, to get back to Riga, we had to fly from Kiev to Vilnius. So we flew over Belarus 2 days before Mr. Protasevich was hijacked from that plane. They could have just as easily taken our plane down, and they would have landed with a speaker and 2 MPs, which probably could have made that an even more sensational issue. Right now, we're all looking forward to what's happening this summer, the NATO Summit, the US President's meetings. And I know that when we talk about NATO, I have this feeling about the NATO Summit. There's so much emphasis on the future. We're looking at the NATO 2030 process and so on. And we have great ideas for the future, but we have no solutions for the present. We talk about military capabilities, and yes, those are increasing. There's been emphasis on that for years. Military cooperation between NATO and EU, defense cooperation is increasing. I think when it comes to military capabilities, we're in good shape and we're getting better. Our biggest weak spot are our political capabilities. It's political unity. The problems that we face, whether it's the occupation of territories in Ukraine, the illegal annexation of Crimea, occupation of Georgian sovereign territory, even Moldova, and other things that Russia have been doing. None of these issues can be resolved militarily, no matter how many weapons and systems we have in NATO. We're not going to resolve this through military efforts. The military is being built up for deterrence and reassurance. We have to solve those problems politically. And the only way we're going to do that is, number one, if NATO is united on these issues. Second, if the EU is united on these issues. And third, if NATO and EU can coordinate their policies. I think that probably the most optimistic aspect of what's happening this year is that we have a new administration in Washington, D.C., one that actually looks upon the EU as a partner that looks upon Europe as a necessary ally. We've suffered through 4 years where pretty much NATO was criticized, the EU was almost abandoned, and we're in a rebuilding process. And I know there's a lot of support. I'm involved in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. There's a lot of support across the aisle from congressmen, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. And so this is the other priority, is to rebuild the transatlantic alliance so that within NATO, but also the US cooperates with the EU on these global issues. And I think that's why what's coming up this summer, I don't know if we're going to see any dramatic changes. You know, sorry to say to our Georgian and our Ukrainian friends, I don't know if you're going to get anything solid other than the usual diplomatic support and vague promises. As far as I'm concerned, Georgia qualified to join NATO 10 years ago, if not sooner. And we all know the reason why. It's got nothing to do with fulfilling the criteria or whatever. It's got to do with an outside player. And we tend to deny that that's the reason, but that is. And Ukraine faces the same problem. And that is an outside player that is doing everything to disrupt not only NATO and EU unity, but also any progress that both Georgia and Ukraine are making. So I think, you know, we're facing some challenges. You mentioned China. 5 years ago, and I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I visited China 3 times in about a 2-year period. There seemed to be this honeymoon with China back in, 5-6 years ago. There was the 16, 17+1, the Silk Road project. We all thought this was going to be a new China and there were all kinds of opportunities. That has changed dramatically. And now if you look at all the documents that are being prepared by NATO for its strategic future, you look at EU comments or even the US administration, China is now #1 on the list. It's important for trade, it's important for global cooperation on things like climate change, but it is increasingly becoming a security problem for us. And when I think in terms of security, and maybe I'll end on this point, it's not, again, militarily that we are threatened. Yes, that's out there. We have, EFP has been doing a wonderful job in the Baltic region and Poland. We always talked about deterrence and reassurance. Well, after 2014, when NATO came up with enhanced forward presence and 22 countries put troops into our 4 countries. #1, we accomplished deterrence, because if anybody asks me, is it working? I'd say, yes, 7 years have passed, Russia hasn't invaded, so the deterrence is working. The reassurance is working, because 7 years ago, my voters are asking me, are we going to be invaded and occupied again? They were literally frightened in the wake of the takeover of Crimea and Donetsk. Today, that's not an issue. Security isn't an issue. We're changing our government today, or at least parts of the government. The issue is economy, health, welfare. These are the main issues, because the assumption is that when it comes to security, when it comes to dealing with Russia, despite what's happening in Belarus and people like Navalny, I think at least in Latvia, people have the confidence, not only in the government, but in these multilateral organizations, that they can continue to handle that. But I would just end on this point that I think for us, it's so critical to rebuild the relationship with the US on common goals. And we have to demonstrate to Russia, to China, to Lukashenko and Belarus, that we are united in Europe. And we know fairly well, even within NATO, there are differences between members like Turkey and Greece. We know within the EU, there are differences between countries over rule of law and democracy. We have to overcome these if we're going to try to resolve these greater global problems. So for me, that's the focus. I'm still an optimist. I think we're gonna be able to pull it off, but it's an ongoing struggle. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. Well, there's been some optimism and also some pessimism. I mean, pessimism regarding whether there would be something tangible coming out for the Eastern partners, maybe Georgia in particular. But then on the other hand, I mean, we are, well, we, meaning collective West, standing firm, and we have some kind of opportunities to rebuilding and strengthening our posture. One thing that has not been mentioned during the first remarks is cyber. I mean, something that bothers me deeply. I know Marina has been dealing with it for some time. Maybe other distinguished panelists have also looked deeper into it. I mean, when you follow the news recently, the way and the boldness and the ruthlessness, how we are attacked in cyberspace, be it governmental infrastructure, be it critical infrastructure in the US, be it businesses, be it spying or just extortion. I mean, this is something that worries me deeply, and I feel as if we are kind of teethless and impotent in West because we all understand how important this topic is, and is there something we should rethink or do differently, because the world watches the situation and we are kind of on the losing end, not able to respond. Are you, dear panelists, willing to address also this issue?
I'm willing to make a brief remark. I totally agree with you on cyber. I mean, I became an ambassador in 1993. Before we had cell phones and computers and email and everything else, we were still communicating in the old way. The technological revolution has changed politics, and it's changed the way we deal with our public and with the public at large. And so when we talk about cybersecurity, yes, there's the technical end of it, the attacks on our infrastructure, disruption of communication. I think this summer with COVID, I think we learned one lesson, and that was when most of our countries went into a shutdown and we told everybody to lock themselves into their apartments. The only thing they had to communicate with the outside world were their cell phones and their computers. But imagine if during the heaviest lockdown, somebody had managed to shut off all communications. No mobile phone, no internet. What would people do? They would have to go out into the streets to find out what's going on, which would have just made the whole crisis even worse. So that's the issue we have to deal with, but it's not just the technology. Oh, and by the way, we have Zapad coming up, the exercises in the Baltic Sea. And some of you may recall 4 years ago, there was an episode when a Russian ship was passing between Latvia and Sweden, and all phone service was shut down, at least in Latvia, for about 5 or 6 hours. And we didn't learn what the cause was until days later, when we learned that it was an experiment by the Russian ship to see whether they can close off communications. And I was in a conference like this in the Swedish foreign defense minister about 2 weeks ago, and he concurred. He agreed that yes, they have noted that the Russians do try it from time to time to try to close off mobile phone communication. So the technical side of it is a challenge, but I think at the same time, it's the sociological side of it. And that is, we have to work with our people on educating them about fake news, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, and so on. And while those of us who border Russia have dealt with interference in our elections for years, I remember somebody in the US asked, after they felt that they were interfered with by Russia during their last election, they asked, how are we dealing with it? I think our 3 countries have been dealing with it for 30 years, ever since we restored independence. The efforts have always been there to influence our politics. It's just the methodologies have changed. now it's new technologies. And I think this is the role that we can play in the Baltics in educating our colleagues in Western Europe and the other member states of NATO and the EU on how to deal with this information and false flag operations and so on. So yes, I think this is a very critical aspect of our future security and defense.
Thank you. And maybe Marina, I mean, your take on the cyber issue. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I listened very carefully to what Ojar said, and I absolutely agree with you. There are two sides of the question. There is cybersecurity and there is disinformation. These are completely two different things. And cybersecurity attacks, cyber attacks, it's a new normality. It doesn't happen this year, although because of pandemic, all the digital topics are much more on political agenda, and cybersecurity is much more on the political agenda. But 2007 attacks on Estonia, 2008 hybrid attacks on Georgia, WannaCry, NotPetya, SolarWinds, the Stuxnet, it's a new normality. The cyber attacks happen, and we have to answer. Unfortunately, we can't answer, it's very difficult to answer globally. In the United Nations, we have a huge ideological division. On one side, there are countries like us, like-minded, who see the benefits of the use of ICTs. On the other side, there are countries like China, Russia, North Korea, who see that ICT is a way of interfering with their domestic affairs. So I think that on a global level, we can do lots of awareness raising, capacity building, but not real steps. Real steps can be done in a group of like-minded. First of all, it's EU, NATO, but not closed clubs. Clubs that are open to all democratic nations who understand the same principles as we do. International law applies to cyber. There is responsibility, there is accountability for offline and online equally. And in that respect, I'm happy with what's happening at the moment in EU and NATO. Of course, much more can be done. But at the same time, I have to recognize that the EU cyber diplomacy toolbox, Council conclusions on how to answer cyber attacks, is a big step forward, which equals offline and online responses. And last year, we had the first collective attribution by the EU, which is a big thing. EU as one answered. Because during the previous attacks, we were hearing responses from US, UK, Estonia, Denmark, other small countries. And the question always was, where's Germany? Where's France? So these collective measures are really strong measures. And the same I can say about NATO. The fact that now a couple of years ago, NATO foreign ministers together attributed the use of the violation of chemical weapons convention and principles of the organization is another big thing. So we are now in the phase of attributing, naming, and taking actions. But of course, it's the beginning and it has to continue. My final remark on disinformation, and as a matter of fact, we are doing a lot together. The Center of Excellence in Tallinn, the Center of Excellence in Riga, but also the Hybrid Center of Excellence in Helsinki. So we're working closely with our Eastern partners. And the same experience that we have in the EU or NATO, we're sharing with Eastern partners. And I'm really proud, now really my last remark, I'm really proud that Estonia was among the 5 countries with Lithuania, Denmark, UK, and I can't remember the 5th, was to start the East Task Force, East Stratcom Task Force within the European External Action Service. There was lots of hesitation 5 years ago, but look today, their example is being taken to West Balkans, their example is being taken to how to manage disinformation concerning COVID and pandemic, so they were doing the right things. So we have good things in place, we just have to be more committed and we have to involve and cooperate more closely with our Eastern partners. Thank you.
Can I also add one point from Lithuania that is kind of interrelated, not repeating everything my Latvian and Estonian friends just said with what I completely agree. It's also the corruption and oligarchy phenomenon. It is interrelated. It is a cancer of our region that is very skillfully is being used to destroy our democracies from inside. we are all fighting with this in our own countries, in the regional countries. But as I understood from our good common friends in Washington, D.C., this aspect will be taken seriously in this future democracy summit to be launched by Biden administration. Yeah, and this is a test for all of us. We a bit discuss Belarus today. We are going to introduce first ever historic sectorial economic sanctions against Belarus regime. In a way, was introduced to Iran or North Korea or Russia after Ukrainian occupation. And it will be a test for the Baltic states because some of those oligarchs, they work in our countries. And I really hope that we will all show the solidarity and we will punish the regime that is using those money, that also producing in our territories with our own businessmen, than to kill Belarusians or imprison them or harass them or torture them. It will be a test for us. But of course, I will not go deep into Georgian problems, but you know, things that I am talking here. We need to deal with this cancer. We need to get rid of those oligarchs in our democracies. Big money cannot interfere in a way it interferes. The same in Ukraine. Look what State Secretary Biden said during his visit. You know, deal with this, please, now, because this is one of this, I would say, well, soft, high-tech even, but very deep tools to destroy our democracies from inside. So we have to be very serious with this.
Many thanks, and may I also remind the attendees that you can put questions to our great panelists through the Q&A button. So please go ahead and put the questions up. There is a question already there concerning Georgia's NATO integration future, and as Zigmantas kindly indicated that Estonia was a front runner in many ways, then the question goes: has Georgia learned Estonia's NATO integration lessons, and is there something that Georgia is lacking today to get a step further? Would it be MAP or something more tangible in the NATO aspiration? So would you describe somehow how you see where Georgia stands right now vis-a-vis NATO?
I can maybe start, but please, Marina and others, you know what I am lacking in current Georgian foreign policy, and also in Ukrainian. I say the same. I said the same during our joint Baltic visit of chairmen of Foreign Affairs Committee. Don't forget that this is not only Eastern Front. This is also Western Front. You know, fight for your accession. And this is a hard work. You know, everybody of us who did it, you know, in diplomacy knows how difficult it is to convince that you have to be on the radars of big EU decision makers. You will have now big landing of Biden in Europe. You will have NATO summit. You know, I understand the frustration that, again, there is no map, but, you know, to earn map, it's a hard work. You know, our former Lithuanian ambassadors visited every state in America, had dinners and lunches with every congressman before a big vote in Senate. We did the same with all EU countries. And we still remember wonderful work together with Marina of Georgian Ambassador Temuri Akobashvili. And some of the current government members served in the same embassy that we've been doing stuff with Temuri. I remember how tough it was for Georgia when the Obama administration came after Bush administration and after the war. But Temuri did that miracle with very hard, great work with think tank community, with the rest. Well, you know, where is Georgia on the Western fronts? Where is Ukraine on the Western fronts? It means the best diplomats money, think tanks like you. It means every day, 24 hours a day work. And you have wonderful administration now. You have one of the most experienced president of United States in foreign policy. Work with every day with this administration. You will have new Berlin soon, whom we will check the temperature again with all Baltic free chairs starting from Tuesday in Berlin. You know, work hard with those capitals. You have French presidency. What about your troops in Mali, actually? Estonians, again, you show the example. You know, your special forces are there, and French need support in Africa today. You made such a great job in Afghanistan. You know, it's historic. What about joining Mali seriously, together with Estonians and maybe Lithuanians soon?
Well, I'll continue where Zhiggy stopped. What is missing? I think it's important to understand. First, world is not fair. Second, it's a political decision. EU membership, as well as NATO alliance membership, as well as MAP. These are political decisions that are taken on a consensus basis, full stop. As the reality today is, there is no political consensus, neither in the EU nor in NATO. I would argue it's even much worse than it was 2008 in Bucharest. We are not even ready to repeat what we said before. We are not ready to talk about European perspective anymore. That's the reality. I hear very often that that's not fair. And then my answer is that, as I said, world is not fair. When we were acceding to the EU, we had to do much more than Finland before us. We saw the same thing, that it wasn't fair, but nobody wanted us in that clubs. Let's be open and frank. We wanted to be there. And that was the reason why we had to do, we were asked to do 3 things, we did 10. We were asked to do things by Friday, we did by Monday, previous Monday. You have to be committed, you have to be dedicated, and you just have to wait and hope that the window of opportunity will be open one day. When that one day will come, I don't know. But again, I'm going to repeat what I said, and I know that Georgians don't want to hear that. But 2024 membership, you will not get it, most probably. Of course, it's a speculation. I can talk on basing my arguments on what I see and hear today. Some things might change, but I'm very, very, very skeptical. That's why my message would be, first, do not do the reforms for EU. You're doing these reforms for your own people, for your own country. That's a big shift in the thinking. And I know that Georgia has already made that shift in thinking. Not all Eastern Partnership countries are. They're still reporting back to Europe what they are doing, but they are doing it for their own people, because their people have chosen European integration and transatlantic integration. And second, I suggest to look for closer sectoral cooperation. I know Georgian situation better, and I think that the things your government and parliament are doing at the moment is really smart, aligning the policies with EU's digital policy, with EU's Green Deal, with EU's trade and development, because through those very concrete sectoral cooperation projects and sectoral cooperation, you can tie yourself more closely to the EU, so that you can be part of EU as, I don't know, Iceland, Switzerland, and Norway are in economic terms, even much more closer in environmental and digital terms. And the third point, yes, please, the same what Zhiggy said, please talk to the big countries. It's easy to talk to us. We know the situation, we support you, we are sometimes critical, but we've been in the same club for 50 years. So I would guess that we understand you better than many other countries do. And we've been on the paths of reforms. And that's why we understand also from that perspective, you better than many other countries do. But as I said, there is a Eastern Partnership fatigue in Europe. So you have to talk not only to those to whom it is convenient and easy to talk to, but go to Bundestag, go to France, go to the big players in the EU who will have the final say on these political questions. So, but on an optimistic note, be prepared, continue with your reforms, and do not lose the moment once you have it. That would be the worst that might happen, to lose the window of opportunity.
If I can, I'm going to agree with Marina. In a way, I feel almost uncomfortable talking to our Georgian and Ukrainian friends whenever they ask, what do we have to do and so on, because I think you're doing everything. You know what has to be done. You've been doing it for years. The problem, except for a few technicalities, isn't what you're not doing. It isn't your fault. The problem is on the outside, both because of Russia, but also because of disunity within the European Union or NATO. We see that constantly. You know, Ukraine's a classic example. Some EU, NATO countries are providing Ukraine with military support. Others are refusing to. The Ukrainians were telling me that they wanted to buy missiles from the UK for their ships on the Black Sea. UK was ready to do it, but they couldn't sell them because parts of those missiles came from Germany. And the German government wouldn't allow the UK to sell their weaponry to Ukraine. So we see divisions within Europe. And I don't even know, I mean, granted, our Georgian and Ukrainian friends can go to Berlin, they can go to Paris and lobby their interests. I think we have to work harder also. We don't have to convince the Georgian and Ukrainians what they need to do. We do have to convince some of our German, Italian, French, and other friends that there's a serious issue going on in these countries. There's a serious problem on their borders. And if there is one, let's say, silver lining to the Ryanair plane hijacking, it was a reminder to the rest of Europe that it doesn't matter what country you live in, anybody can become a victim of this kind of state terrorism. Same thing happened with KLM plane that was shot down over Ukraine. And you know, there were a number of foreign EU citizens on that, the Ryanair plane that was brought down in Belarus. And what we have to do is keep reminding our Western friends. And one other issue where we know there's a great division is Nord Stream 2. And here again, we can't make any headway. We know how damaging this is to Ukraine. It's potentially damaging to the Baltic Sea environment. And yet, even unfortunately, it sounds like even the US is starting to slowly back off on their hard position on Nord Stream 2. And that's going to change the situation in the coming year, since I understand they're about 90% completed with that project. So we have new challenges, but really we have to work on our allies and our colleagues in NATO and EU to get them more in line and to realize this is a joint problem, not just a Baltic or Ukrainian or Georgian problem.
Thank you, dear friends. Oh, okay, Zygmantas.
Yeah, just one remark, because, you know, we are kind of Catholic romantic here in Vilnius. We like to inspire people. I would say like this, again, teasing and provoking the discussion. I still think that with Biden administration, with New Berlin, with current attacks on democracy, when global democracy is understood that either we unite and we have a plan, strategic plan, or this is a question of our survival. China, Russia, you know, everybody, giants working against us. So you can have a chance as Georgia, but you have to be the best and ask yourself, are you the best today on democracy? Ask yourself, are you the best today on foreign policy? Take Belarus example. Are you the best on economy? Well, I still remember, yes, maybe, but we will see. Maybe Maya Sandu will make a miracle in Moldova after elections. Maybe they will jump because they were for some time a champion. And Ukraine, you know, look, they withstood it all. They were the only country that didn't took Sputnik vaccine, you know, trying to show the solidarity. Because, you know, it's about everything, about every detail, how you do it. So Georgians should judge yourself, and you know, you have incoming municipality elections. Will it be completely sound, you know, free elections that could be exemplary? I hope so. Will you implement every detail of Michel and okay, EU-American deal? Will you? We will see it very soon. Then you can speak about EU and NATO membership.
Thank you very much, Sigmantas, for these remarks, because the initial question actually was about Georgia's readiness, and this absolutely demands also some explanation and remarks from Alex, because he is the only Georgian here on the panel.
Actually, thank you, Ekim, and thank you to all speakers for the very, very important messages to Georgian people. And I fully agree with you that we have to be champions. We have to be in doing reforms, in the process of democratic reforms in our country. But and I must say that we were champions at one time, and we were hearing about the strategic patience, about the working with the big capitals, and always there was the issue of Russia, and it will not go away. I mean, I don't have to convince you, dear friends, from Estonia, from Lithuania, and from Latvia. Yes, we have to convince the big capitals you have mentioned. But here in Georgia is also some fatigue. Marina mentioned the Eastern Partnership fatigue. Here is there are the signs of fatigue of the EU integration and NATO integration, and it is very, very well used by the Russian propaganda machinery. That you can see that the politicians who are backed by the Kremlin that saying that publicly that, oh, come on, there is no more cheating about Georgia's NATO membership, Georgia's EU membership. Look, the EU, European MEPs, your friends, your politicians are telling you that there will be no membership or membership action plan in the nearest future. So we have to face, from our side, we're seeing the problem. We know, we understand that we have the problem of moving forward the process of the democratization and reforming the country, fighting the corruption and the oligarchy cancer, as very rightly mentioned by Zygmuntas. But we also see that even if we do this, the momentum may not come in the nearest future, because there is always Russia, who is considered when the decisions are taken. I don't know whether you agree or not, but not inviting Ukraine and Georgia to NATO Summit, I think it is a very bad signal, very frankly speaking, to Georgian and Ukrainians, and a very important signal and message to Russians. They will certainly use this opportunity to, and I saw in the Russian media that there are no Georgians and Ukrainians at this important and historic summit. I understand that Biden's first summit with NATO allies is important, and optics is important too, that the NATO alliance is united and strong again. But we sacrificed our soldiers' lives and officers' lives in the battle in Afghanistan, and Ukrainians did too. So Georgians and Ukrainians expected, to be very frank, to get some stronger messages, not regular diplomatic messages and the reiteration in the declarations. And it could be, Marina mentioned the centers of excellences in Tallinn, in Helsinki, why not in Georgia, and why not in Ukraine? We are fighting the disinformation here and try to fight the disinformation here. So I think the problem is both in inside the country and on the very borders of our country, which is a problem for the North Atlantic Alliance itself as well.
If I can just add something, I think one thing that Georgia does very well is organize events to attract Europeans, to attract others. The conferences, seminars, you've been doing that, and it's very critical to get people to come in to see your country. And I think that's one of the barriers that we face. I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee about 5-6 years ago, and when Latvia had the rotating chairmanship of the Nordic Baltic 8 Foreign Affairs Committee chairs, I proposed that we hold our meeting not in Riga, but in Tbilisi. And we did. We went to Georgia. And what shocked me was that apart from the Balts, our 5 Nordic colleagues had never been to Georgia before. This was their first trip ever to Georgia. And I want to use this to bring up another event that's coming up, and that is on August 23rd, the Crimean Platform will be unveiled. And the Ukrainians are working very hard to get heads of state, prime ministers, and others to come. Yes, it's a PR event, but for us Balts who understand the importance of non-recognition and trying to maintain a non-recognition policy, having a big event on August 23rd would be a signal to Russia and the rest of the world. And I think we've got to do everything. And yet, again, when we were in Kiev, President Zelensky, we asked, how you're doing on invites. And he said, well, every time we invite someone, the first question is, who else is coming? Especially from presidents and prime ministers. And there's very slow response from Northern Europe, Western Europe. I think the Balts in Poland have already committed. I know our president is going. So we've got to do everything to bring the West into Georgia, into Ukraine, into Donetsk, into your border areas near South Ossetia, because it's a reminder to our colleagues, this is a serious issue. People are dying. People have lost their homes and their territory.
Right, dear friends.
Just also a reaction to what Alex said. I will again cite my friend Marina. Well, even if you don't have those immediate signals now, and you should understand why you don't have it. Look, we know we are all 3 former ambassadors in Washington, D.C. It takes time to Washington to get on agenda. A lot of people are still not appointed. Washington is still not even, traveling. Well, traveling a bit. Some of our friends are still to be appointed and formulate the final strategy. But what kind of alternative do you have? Even if you don't have it now from Biden, you can get it maybe next year or until the end of his administration. Fight for it. Because if you don't do reforms for yourself and your own country, do you want to become Belarus? Do you want to become, I don't know, Russia? You don't have any alternative. You just have to be perfect Georgia with the best democracy credentials, the best economy, big high-tech things, best everything. Estonia of the Caucasus, if you want. But then if you will become this kind of state, not this kind of state that, always fighting with each other and blaming each other. Well, if you will be perfect on everything, don't worry. Memberships will come, but start from yourself first.
Thank you, thank you, guys. I also had a look at the questions here in the questions and answers section, and maybe we should try and combine some of the questions. I mean, put by, let's say, Shota and Tekla. I mean, this is about disinformation and the cohesion of the society facing disinformation. It was briefly mentioned also when we tried to discuss cyber. So we drifted also a bit into disinformation. But how and what steps can be taken or should be taken, and how can collective West kind of approach this disinformation warfare? And is there something that we could tell our Georgian friends here? Because, well, maybe even not, because we're all facing the same situation. But anyway, disinformation.
I'll be happy to start with the topic, and I'll still say that we are doing many things. And today we are with disinformation and fighting disinformation in a much better position than we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. The momentum that West was too naive is over. West has been also now under disinformation operations, and they listen much more to us. To us, when I say to us, I mean the Baltic countries who have been under information operations since the first day we regained independence. My country has been pictured as a small Nazi country that violates massively the rights of Russian-speaking population in Estonia. So we've been under that all our life, all our independent life. But I'm not going to waste more time here. My advice is please Google East Strategic Communication Task Force. EU East Strategic Communication Task Force. And there you can find very concrete measures that have been taken within the EU, but also with our partners. There are policy documents, but there are also very practical suggestions. And I'm happy to just start answering also Shota's polarization of society. I think the last crisis showed it very clearly after parliamentary elections, how easy it is to go on the slippery road of falling back. I have to say that I have never been in so difficult discussions in the European Parliament as we were in before the Michel mediation and during Michel's mediation. Some European partners were suggesting introducing sanctions against Georgia. That's to the country that has been #1 of integration for years. So I think the polarization of society, it's a huge threat. Trigis mentioned your incoming local elections. Yes, all the eyes will be on you. All the eyes are at the moment on your judicial reform, on your electoral reform, on all the other reforms. Because the last year just has shown with polarization how easy it is to fall back. That's why I'm urging, and I'm happy that UNM finally joined Parliament. I'm happy about that. But if there are any UNM people listening to us today, please sign the agreement. The agreement is important because of the points that it has. It's important because you need opposition to do the reforms. You need vocal, educated, constructive opposition to do judicial and constitutional reforms. And finally, it's also not only the letter of the agreement, but it's the spirit. It's avoiding the same polarization that there was directly after the elections of Parliament. At the moment, I hope that European Parliament will be able to come to observe the local elections. It's in the hands of President Sassoli. I hope he allows. At least last time when Speaker Ahakuchava was in Brussels, he had very good discussion with President Sassoli. But the eyes will be again on you. And I know it sounds like a slogan, but these elections will be again crucial for the future of Georgia. Thank you.
Any more comments on the disinformation? I mean, okay. Yes, yeah.
I was asked and I saw with the questions I was asked if our military deterrence has prompted Russia and others to turn to cyber attacks and hybrid attacks. I don't think so. I think they would be doing that anyway. And it's not just Russia, but it's China. For as far as we know, Iran, and there are other players. This whole, the whole information revolution that has taken place has opened up opportunities to try to influence people in all kinds of ways. Interference in elections, interference with infrastructure. I think the US finally was exposed to that over the last election and the previous one to that. We're faced with it. We see that happening throughout Europe, not only with elections or referendum. And the complicated part of the issue is that we can't just ban all this information, because it's a much bigger issue about freedom of speech, the social networks, and we know that the EU now is looking at regulation, how to control or somehow manage the social networks. And it's a big philosophical debate about freedom of information. Is freedom of speech mean you have a right to lie or say stupid things publicly? And so again, this all comes back to trying to educate our public on what they're dealing with. We'll never be able to totally eliminate all this, but we've got to find a way. And like Marina said, we have the center in the EU in Brussels. We have the NATO Stratcom Excellence Center here in Riga. We have a lot of people studying what's being done, analyzing it and trying to come up with ways. But the key thing for our public in large is we've got to educate them as to identify and analyze what is disinformation, what is false news. But unfortunately, when we see the dark web and we see the conspiracy theories, there will always be a small percentage of the population that goes for wacky ideas, and they will cling to them. The problem is there have always been a small group of people who have very bizarre concepts of what's going on in the world. Today, they have a platform in the social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever. And this is what we're combating now, is how do you defeat nonsense or outright criminal activity to try to disrupt our democracies. And it can't all be done technologically. It's got to be done through education and awareness.
Right, as it always is the case when we have the discussion with our good Georgian friends, then the discussion becomes very Georgianized, if I may put it like this. The topic of today's event was kind of trying to focus on the future of EU and NATO, but our dear Georgian friends, of course, have the way of having their friends elsewhere, showing sympathy and discussing the points also of Georgia. But if I may, there was a question also. We don't have too much time left. There was a question also on energy security and NATO, and with the oil prices going up every day, and with the US kind of showing green light to Nord Stream. So where do we stand with energy and energy security?
Yeah, I will start. I kind of hope, I still keep hope on Nord Stream. I think Biden administration simply opted for another method instead of sanctions, making it very clear to Berlin that this is time to show a leadership and kill the pipeline. And I think that will be possible after elections. I feel it. And you encourage Berlin to do it. And we will all encourage, all free Baltic chairs, all other parliamentarians. We are writing letters each day to Berlin, and we hope they will do it. But I would also like to draw attention to another Nord Stream in our case. That's Astravets nuclear power plant. And we call it Chernobyl 2. It was just licensed, disregarding all nuclear safety stuff. They are building a new reactor that is just 30 kilometers from where I'm staying. This is a joint operation of China, Russia, and Lukashenko. And we have a little problem in demanding EU solidarity not to buy the energy from this plant and not to feed Lukashenko's killers and Oman and let that regime survive. Ukrainians expressed their solidarity, and we are now negotiating with our Baltic brothers and sisters to do the same. And I really hope we will be able to do it soon.
Other panelists on the energy topic, any remarks? Not really, but Alex, anything? Yeah. Because I've been kind of pushing the agenda. Anything that you would like to bring to the attention of the panelists before?
Yes,
before we wrap up.
Actually, I can notice that we have agreed that it would be great to hear from our panelists their views on China. Each of them underlined briefly about the China and the US, NATO future positioning with regard to China. I just want to ask you, is the United States and EU and is United States and NATO allies, are they on the same page with regard in relationship with China's Communist Party? Is Europe ready to make a coalition to deter China?
I'll say that the concerns over China are growing throughout Europe and in NATO, and we see that coming up more and more. China, it's not a threat over China militarily invading us, but it's China trying to establish itself globally. And this is going to be an ongoing threat, and it is interfering in the business of other countries. We have to find a united front on how to deal with this issue. But even with China, just like with the Nord Stream 2, we have countries that do business with China. You can't just cut it off totally. We can't isolate ourselves. China is a major player, and we have to find a way to balance these interests. The only thing I do want to say, in a number of these conferences, some people have raised a question about, sanctions against Russia. Won't that drive Russia into the arms of China? I'm not worried about that. China will use Russia as far as it can be to its advantage. I don't think they'll ever be friends. I don't think those are two countries that will ever trust one another. I think Russia, during World War II, tried to form an alliance with another country and found out what happens when they turn on you. So I'm not worried about, I think China is very practical, very pragmatic. It's in their interests to sow chaos, confusion, and to weaken both NATO and EU. And right now, this is the one thing I think that Russia and China have in common. They're both interested in seeing a weaker NATO and a weaker, less robust EU. And on these areas, I think they will cooperate, but they each have different interests. And I think China has much greater capabilities to spread its influence around the world than Russia does. So we're going to have to continue to focus on dealing with the Chinese challenge in the coming years.
I'd just like to add a little to what Oya said. First of all, yes, there is no common, we can talk about our common foreign policy, but there is no united common policy towards China. There are even different cooperation mechanisms of the EU with China. Well, as you know, the 17+1 format, which includes mainly Eastern European, Central European countries, and which Lithuania left. I hope that my country will do the same, because that's exactly what Oya said, that China is playing half of Europe against half of Europe, having bilateral relations with some countries whom they choose, and having group relations with other countries that they choose. So this has to end. And my second point, we had a very critical discussion on China relations in the European Parliament last week, and or was the week before that, anyway, in the last 2 weeks. And we even passed a resolution because, as you know, some members of our parliament were put on the blacklist by Chinese because of being too vocal about human rights situation and Hong Kong and other developments in the region. So what European Parliament decided, we froze. We decided not to continue with the investment agreement with China until the sanctions against our members are in place. So yes, we can be united on some topics, but in the Parliament, it's much easier. It's much more difficult with specific countries. I'm not going to name them, but unfortunately, these are the same countries that stop resolutions on Russia, that stop resolutions on Belarus, that have the trade ties with China. It's unfortunately, we come to the same countries. And yes, so far, although we're trying to have common, united EU foreign policy, we don't have it. We try to align it as much as possible, but with different interests, different backgrounds, can't do it 100% and on all topics.
And if I may, I also continue with what Marina was saying. You know, I was inspired by a few words of Biden in his State of the Union address. He said, autocracies will not win the future. America will. Well, I rephrase it, democracies will. We will. So this is the front line of autocracies and democracies. And of course, the biggest leader of autocracies is China, communist China. That's why we made a deliberate decision to get rid of 17+1. And actually, we even calculated it economically. Honestly, our relations with Singapore is much beneficial to us than with China or with little states in Africa. China is aggressive. They are trying to take over our strategic networks, even fintechs. They are going smart. So we have also to be smart, and we invest now the whole energy into most democratic and technologically advanced, innovative countries around China. We are opening embassy. Well, we opened it in South Korea. We will open it in Singapore. This year, we will open representation in Taiwan. Taiwan will open in Lithuania. We will do it in, well, actually, we did it to Australia. We're just sending an ambassador. We will strengthen our embassies in Japan and so on. We have a lot to do in the region, and why we have to follow those Chinese autocracies or any other communist states? Didn't we learn from our past? And actually, sorry, I'm always provoking, I know, especially Georgian audience. What are you doing with Stalin in Georgia and monuments there? You know, think about that. Deal with your past, because when some Georgian driver invited me to visit Stalin Museum, I think he's really crazy. And this is a reaction of normal people in the West. Deal with your own past. Get rid of anything you have to deal with autocratic or kind of, you know, I know, criminal past if you want. Be pure, best democracy on earth. Be the shining beauty of democracy in Caucasus. You know, inspire millions to follow you, and then you will get all your dreams you wanted. But show that example.
Dear friends, I'm afraid it is time to wrap it up. And in a way, I think it's so appropriate that Sigimantas kind of ended up on the very general and all-important notion of whether democracies can push back the attack of autocracies, and this is actually what the future of EU and NATO is all about. So I would like to thank all three of the panelists for their wonderful contributions, and I would like to thank the Rondelli Foundation for excellent cooperation. And perhaps I'll leave it with Alex then from the Rondelli Foundation to say the final words.
I also would like to join Ekem on thanking our distinguished panelists for their very frank, very open, but very important messages to the Georgian society. We really tried to have today the discussions on China, on Indo-Pacifics, on Belarus, but of course, I'm happy that Georgia is always on the mind of our friends. Thank you very much. And Rondelli Foundation will continue with this perfect partners in cooperation with the Estonian Diplomatic School, and we hope very much to have in nearest future the conferences again in Georgia, as you are very wisely advised to us, and we welcome as a panelist and as just guests and friends of Georgia. Thank you very much. Thank you.